Hi, this is Megan, and here's a video on how to use frame space and quilt space. Um, for Pro Stitcher Lite, frame space you have to use, and it shows what is available to quilt within each pass of your quilt. With quilt space on Pro Stitcher Premium, it's just a guide so that it kind of helps prevent you from hitting the bars. So I am doing this video on my simulator of my laptop. So I will show you with a simulator. So anyway, all right. So after I've loaded my quilt, these two gray lines are indicative of the quilt top and the quilt backing. And I bring my machine to the upper left-hand side of the quilt back. And I'm going to area, and I'll go to quilt space or frame space. And there's a dong, and it drops a dot. In frame space, it would be reddish brown. For quilt space, it's black. Now, you may, older versions, you may have to hit two corner over here down underneath quilting space or frame space. So there is that option, depending on which version you have. If you hear the dong, it dropped a point. It may not hear the dong, but you want to look for that little point. Okay, I'm going to hit measure to make sure I get the right kind of amount. So on my 18-inch machine, I have about 14 inches of quilting space available. That doesn't mean I'm going to do 14 inches, but that's what my frame space will be. I don't do any more than 12 inches. And I'm going to hit quilt space. Okay, I'm going to move my crosshairs off the screen. So what this means is this is what's available to quilt in each of my passes. For Pro Stitcher Lite, if your design hits those lines, it won't stitch. It just won't. So you have to make sure things don't touch. So let's pull up a design. I'm going to pull up Field of Flowers. And this fits very nicely in my frame. It's 9 inches high. On my 18-inch throat, I will do up to 12 inches. That doesn't mean, even though I have over 14 inches of space, that doesn't mean I'm going to do 14 inches of design, because when you advance it, it's going to not be so fun to try and get it exactly just right. There's very little margin for error if you do a design maximum size. So I'm going to go ahead and leave this design at 9 inches. If I do decide to change it, I will change it here before I get anywhere else. Okay. And then I baseline. So do any changes and then baseline. I'm going to then go to repeat. Oh, I can't do a repeat yet. I mean, I could, but I'm going to get an area first. So I'm going to hit area. And let's go to, usually I'm going to do my area a little bit outside my backing. So it's just a little bit outside, about a ½ inch. I'm going to hit 2 corners. Now that's a ding and a pink line. So let's come down here. I'm going to use my tools over here to move it over. And I'm going to go to the bottom of where my frame space is, and just a little over the edge, about a ½ inch. If it's a really uneven quilt, I might add an inch. And I will hit 2 corners. So now I have a pink line. And if you have a Pro Stitcher Lite, this black one, which is outside and not touching the pink line for the most part, maybe on the bottom, is your frame space or quilt space. Okay, move that off. And I'm going to change the height of my design to, I think the quilt is 40 by 50, so I'm going to hit 52. I add a little bit at the bottom. Okay, zoom to my area. And then I can go to repeat. And I'm going to hit fill. I never hit stretch. Never, ever, ever. Okay. If you hit stretch, you're likely to exceed your throat space. And that would be not necessarily okay. So I don't hit stretch, period. I will add another horizontal and it'll go over, and that's okay. I'm going to crop it off afterwards. And then vertical, first thing I'm going to do is snug these rows up a little bit so I don't get a rowy look. Okay, and then add another repeat. That looks pretty good. I'm going to baseline it. I go to modify, crop, outside, have it stitch the edges. Let's make sure I have my jumps on and my start ends on. If I didn't stitch the edges, it would be lots of green dots on the edge, and so we don't want to do that. So you'd have all these, and that's not okay. So we redo and baseline, go to area, and I'm going to clear my area. We don't need the area. You're then going to save this design, okay? That's very important that you always save before you stitch. All right, so now I know I can do row 1 because I know, but I can barely see the difference between these designs. It looks good, but while you're learning to find this differentiation between rows can be daunting. And when you advance it, you might not get it right. So this is kind of difficult, and it can be difficult to see. If you have difficulty with that, then don't use designs that you can't tell the difference between rows just yet. You're going to want to do designs that you can tell the difference between rows. So when you advance it, so when I advance, my needle would be somehow over here where my arrow is, and I would hit drag, and then I'm going to roll my quilt with my needle down until I can see the bottom of that design. And I want to see on my screen, where is that bottom? If you can't really tell and it's difficult, don't do this design yet. I mean, you could leave a bigger space, but that doesn't necessarily look good. So designs that are super nesty can be kind of difficult. So you want to make sure you can get the next row within your throat space. For Pro Stitcher Premium, this keeps us from hitting the bars, which we've all done. Pro Stitcher Lite users get a warning that says you can't do this because your design is outside of frame space. We just hit the bars and basically have to reboot our machine. So that's kind of the excuse me, the downside if you don't use this and you end up hitting the bars. So let's go ahead and close that design. Close selected. Okay. If I were to choose a design that I can see where it fits, I'm moving that into my space. Go to my area. Oops. And I'm going to go ahead just a little bit outside. Hit 2 corners. Go to the bottom over here. Hit 2 corners. Tell it that it's 52 inches long. And select my design and hit repeat. If I need to resize it, I will. But I can go ahead and hit fill, add a horizontal or 2, add a vertical, change the gap. But even when I change the gap, I can still see exactly where they nest. Need another one. I can move that around, and you can do this all with your finger. Kind of want to move it up a little bit. Baseline it, modify, crop, outside, edges, and baseline. And then I can go to area and I can clear the area. And then I can see that I can do row 1 and I can do row, oh no, I can't do row 2 because it goes outside of my frame space. If I did it a little bit higher, could I do row 2? Barely. but I'm not going to because it's touching that frame space. It's going to touch it. It might not touch it enough to error out, but it would touch it enough that it may bump this part of the design up a little bit. So you just don't want to get close to your frame space. It's just not a good idea. So you'll stitch a row and then you'll advance. And I am visually able to see each time when I hit drag that how far I need to move up to make my design so I can fit the next row. Now, sometimes if I only have a little bit, I'll do just a little bitty roll. And then I don't have to, it's just a little easier and quicker. I don't smooth out my batting and stuff. If I do a big roll and roll it the whole throat space, I'm going to make sure to smooth out my batting, make sure everything's basted down on the right and the left. But if you only have to go an inch, sometimes you don't have to worry about that too much. Anyway, and that's how I use frame space and quilt space. Anyway, thanks for watching. And if you have more questions, let us know. Thank you.